Fight to Fight, the story of the Black Canadian wartime experience and the No.2 Construction Battalion. At the start of the First World War, like we all knew, many young Canadians volunteered to join their country's armed forces. However, many Black and Asian men were told that they could not enlist. Most battalions during the First World War did not welcome everyone, and specifically discriminated against Black and Asian soldiers. Today, we're going to learn about the No.2 Construction Battalion, one of the two predominantly Black battalions in Canadian military history, and the only Canadian battalion composed of Black soldiers to serve in World War I. The No.2 Construction Battalion was a segregated, non-combatant unit during the First World War, and to this day remains the largest Black unit in Canadian military history. Black Canadians have always understood the importance of defending their country, with their first battle being on Canadian soil in the War of 1812. Even though they face varying levels of discrimination in their fight to serve, they have widely contributed to military operations in Canada and around the world. At the outbreak of World War I, Black Canadians rushed to volunteer for the Canadian Expeditionary Force, but they were soon made aware by other white Canadians that it was a white man's war, and that they had no part in fighting for their country. Other soldiers told them that we don't want a checkerboard army, but despite the fact that they were discriminated against, Black Canadians never abandoned their goal, which was to fight for their country. By 1915, when it was made clear that Black Canadians could not join the war, members of the Black community petitioned the military for inclusion in the Canadian Expeditionary Force. George Morton, a letter carrier and civil rights activist, wrote a letter to Sir Sam Hughes. At the time, Sir Hughes was the Minister of Militia and Defense. In the letter, Morton asked the minister why members of the Black community were being turned away when trying to enlist. Talks ensued, and the baton was passed to J.R.B. Whitney, the publisher of the Canadian Observer. In November of 1915, he began a recruiting campaign, but since no commanding officer was willing to accept the platoon, Whitney was told that his permission to recruit was not granted. Soon after, Whitney proposed that his platoon be placed with a battalion overseas. On July 5, 1916, the No.2 Construction Battalion was authorized after months of hard work from dedicated Black Canadians. This is a photo of an ad placed in the Canadian Observer, and it reads, No.2 Construction Battalion for Colored Men of Canada, men required for all kinds of construction work. The battalion will go overseas as soon as recruited up to strength. Apply at nearest recruiting office. On board the SS Southland, the No.2 Construction Battalion set sail for Europe on the 28th of March, 1917. The battalion sailed with 19 officers and 595 men, which was not nearly enough to form a battalion. The solution to this was to transform the battalion into a labor company, and so it was renamed the No.2 Construction Company. Shortly after this change, the No.2 Construction Company joined the Canadian Forestry Corps, as they needed labor support for the operation in southeast France. Members of the No.2 Construction Company worked as translators, fighters, snipers, loggers, and more. These soldiers played a vital role in transporting supplies to the troops, building depots, maintaining the railroads, and acting as sentries and supplying the wood needed to rebuild the crumbling trench walls and disband the grating. They did most of this work in the dangerous combat zone and at the risk of their lives. A soldier I would like to highlight today is William Andrew White. Not only was he one of the first Black soldiers in Canadian Army, but he was also a courageous soldier and chaplain. William Andrew White was the son of formerly slave parents. He was born during the Reconstruction period after the American Civil War. Within his family, he was known as Andrew rather than William. In the 1890s, White traveled to Baltimore, Maryland, where he joined the Union Baptist Church. He was accepted to Acadia University in 1899, and so he moved to Canada. In 1916, frustrated with the war overseas, he wanted to go out and help in any way he could. He could no longer work in the background along with other Black soldiers like George Morton. They lobbied the Canadian government until they were finally able to participate in the war. All the officers in the battalion were white except for Reverend White, who became the unit's chaplain. This makes him one of the few black officers in the CEF and the British Empire. However, as chaplain, White was an honorary captain, not a commissioned officer, unlike his white co-workers. The No.2 Construction Battalion went to Britain in March of 1917. The following May, they were deployed to France, where they served near the town of La Joux in the Jura Mountains, near the border of Swiss. They assisted the logging companies in logging, milling, and lumber shipping. At the time, lumber was an important material for constructing trenches, duckboards, weapon platforms, ammunition boxes, and many other items. Although White did not need to work alongside his soldiers, he was always concerned about their welfare. Even in uniform, black soldiers were treated as second-class citizens, and White wrote in his diary that neighboring units refused to accept him as a chaplain, even though they had none. His struggle in the war was documented in a diary that is currently in a Nova Scotia museum today. Reverend William White is important not only because he was the only and first black officer in the Canadian Expeditionary Unit, but also because he fought for the equal treatment of black soldiers both in Canada and overseas. He inspired advocacy and social advancement, and it is important to not forget his efforts today. With the armistice on November 11th, 1918, there was no need for the No.2 Construction Company and the Forest Corps. So, by December 2nd, 1918, the soldiers returned home. The battalion was disbanded on the 15th of September, 1920, as the militia headquarters dissolved the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Although they faced varying levels of discrimination in their fight to serve, the No.2 Construction Battalion remained steadfast and committed to their goal. The men of the No.2 Construction Battalion were incredibly brave and dedicated, so it is important not to forget the sacrifices that they have made for this country.